Now, Islam is not immune from failing to recognize their Lord. This is a passage from the surah called Al-Tawbah, translated as immunity in Rodwell's Quran. It's the 9th surah. Verse 107 says, there are some... Now think about this. I want you to hear this one clearly. This is a very gloomy, and it's not a prophecy. It is an acknowledgement. It says, there are some who have built a mosque for mischief and for infidelity and to disunite the faithful, and in expectation of him who in time past warred against God and his apostle. They will surely swear our aim was only good, but God is witness that they are liars. Never set thou thy foot in it. So this verse is from the Quran. It's not a tradition. It's not something that happened after the ascension of Muhammad. This is revealed by the Prophet Muhammad himself, that already in his day, even if it is a prophecy, we have seen that mosque, is what I'm saying. There is mischief, and there is unfaithfulness in both respects, whether it's infidelity to God or carnal infidelity, and division, and a near rabid attempt to disunite people who truly want to believe in God. And sadly, they are preparing themselves for him who warred against God and his apostle. So here, this actually is foretelling today. And I cannot impress enough upon the Muslim religious leadership in the world to read this verse and to see yourself in it and to renounce what you're doing. Because this is clear. I didn't say this. This is what God himself has said. They are expecting the one who warred against God and his apostle. So they're expecting, first of all, God and his apostle to appear. His apostle is, of course, one of the titles of Muhammad. So in the days of the return, it's this foretelling 2 messengers of God will appear. God, one title is God, and the other title is his apostle. His Holiness the Bab, Sayyid Ali Muhammad, as a Sayyid, is a direct descendant of the apostle of the Prophet Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah, the glory of God, fulfills the other title in this verse. And at the end of 107 it says, but God is witness that they are liars. Now, when God is a witness against you, there is no hope. That's why I say you must renounce your allegiance to these unfaithful people. And the Prophet Muhammad is warning never to set your foot in it. Now, in the next verse, it continues, there is a mosque founded from its first day in piety. More worthy is it that thou enter therein. Therein are men who aspire to purity, and God loveth the purified. Now, I've heard a lot of complaints from non-Muslims, Christians and other religious scholars, criticizing the Quran for being just denying that it's a holy book and that it only promotes, and suggesting that it only promotes violence, which is not true. And here is a verse that exposes corruption from within its midst, and it says, God loveth the purified, and piety, and piousness. So, those naysayers would be well advised to use the Quran to expose corruption within the ranks of the Islamic religious leaders instead of just flatly denying that it's a holy book. They would get a lot more currency, so to speak, by recognizing the book for what it is, the truth. Now here is a picture of a mosque that this verse is referring to. This is the shrine of Sheikh Tabarsi, and the second picture is the entrance of the shrine of Sheikh Tabarsi in Mazendaran. This is where 233 followers of the Bab, called Babis, were unfolding the black standard, announcing that the promised one had come, that the Bab had come, and calling people to join them. They could only find 233 brave, pure souls. They approached this village outside of Mazandaran and were barred from entering by the inhabitants. And the Babis complained that in the Quran you have to be polite to your guests, and they'd done nothing wrong. They'd only announced the coming of God's messenger. Townspeople, instead of welcoming this news and embracing their fellow countrymen, instead sent for the Shah, or reported to the Shah, and the Shah, fearing that his authority would be challenged, which was an unfounded fear, instead of, again, investigating the claims of these loyal and trustworthy believers, the Shah instead sent 10,000 heavily armed troops to confront and put down these 233 pretty much unarmed young men and religious scholars, and some old men too, who had a few horses and some swords. And the thing of it is that the hand of God was behind them, because every time the Muslim army would attack these souls and succeed in actually killing one or two of them, the Babis would launch such a ferocious assault, and it was only 19 of them. Their leader was Mullah Hussein, and he, with 18 other believers, would mount their chargers, mount their horses, draw their swords, and cry out, "Ya Sahib Zaman, O thou Lord of the age," and launch such a ferocious retaliation for having been unjustly murdered as to strike terror into the hearts of the 10,000 heavily armed troops. And for 8 months they held out, until finally, through treachery and artifice, the Muslim leaders of the troops swore on the Holy Quran that if they just surrendered, they would be allowed to go free. And they wrote it inside a Quran and swore before God and the Prophet Muhammad that what they said was true, and they lied. And so deceit and treachery seem to have become the mainstay of the followers of these troops and the Shah and the religious leaders who deny that the teachings of Baha'u'llah are the truth from God. Now here's another, it's a prophecy, and it's from the Quran, Al-Ahzab, the Confederates, Surah 33. It is the one that the Muslim scholars and leaders hang their hat on to confirm their position, that God will never, throughout eternity, for the rest of eternity, send us another messenger, even though we may be in dire need of one, as we are now. It's their reason why they say they deny that another prophet will ever appear from God, and authorizes them and anyone who is a messenger of God and proves them wrong, authorizes them to put him to death. Kind of severe when you think about it. Verse 40 from Surah 33 says, "Muhammad is not the father of any man among you, but he is the messenger of God. Muhammad is the apostle of God and the seal of the prophets." And this verse is they latch on to the last 5 words, the seal of the prophets. And to interpret that, mind you, not that it clearly says, this does not say God will never send another prophet. By no means does it say that. It says Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. And they interpret the seal to mean the final prophet, ever, for all time. And they will put to death, as I said, anyone who proves them wrong and claims to be a prophet of God, and actually is a prophet of God. Because many people have claimed to be, not many, but a number of people have claimed to be a prophet of God. They weren't put to death. But the Bab did claim to be the Qa'im, the Wali Asr, the Messiah, promised Christ, and they did put him to death for no reason. But let us go back to the first part of this prophecy, which says, Muhammad is not the father of any man among you, Now, we know, of course, that he was the father of a daughter, Fatima, he and his wife Khadijah, and that he had, after the passing of Khadijah, there were several women who were presented to him by other Muslims who aspired to leadership as gifts, which Muhammad accepted to be his wife, which is more of a form of protection because in those days, females were targets, were not favored, and were routinely put to death. Female children were buried alive, and such other horrors. But we know that Muhammad had one daughter, and that he had no other children through his, quote, wives, unquote, his other wives. So that means a number of things. In order to not have children, it's likely that they did not engage in any activity that would produce children, which is a whole, I don't want to interrupt the course of this argument to discuss that issue. But nonetheless, it says Muhammad is not the father of any man among you. But first it says Muhammad is not the father. Now in religious prophecy, Christians await the Father and the Son, the Jews await the Father, the mighty God, the everlasting Father. And here Muhammad is disclaiming that he is the Father. He's saying specifically he is not the Father. So in terms of there shall never be, this assertion that there shall never be another prophet after Muhammad, he's saying he's not the Father, and the Father is yet to come. So they're just flat out wrong. There's no justification to assert that, first of all, God would never leave us alone. And second of all, it just secures the religious leaders who assert this absurd notion that God will never send us another prophet, and that they're authorized to put to death anybody who proves them wrong. Really, it's absurd and dangerous. Now here again, I want to show how the Quran is a very promising holy book. It asks the question, which of the two is best? He who hath founded his building on the fear of God and the desire to please him, or he who hath founded his building on the edge of a treacherous bank, washed away by torrents, so that it rusheth with him into the fire of hell. But God guideth not those who are the wrongdoers. And again, here this is where the Quran could be used to expose corruption within the ranks of the Muslim religious leaders who are wrongdoers and who assert who raise the cry of murder as a slogan for God, blaspheme in his name, and cause great disservice throughout the world. And the Quran offers a lot of warnings. Their building which they have built will not cease to cause uneasiness in their hearts until their hearts are cut in pieces. God is knowing, wise. Now, of course, their hearts are not going to be chopped up into pieces. This is metaphorically, spiritually, meaning that their hearts, they have no hearts, they have no love in their hearts. Now, speaking of prophecies of future messengers, again from the Surah of Qaf, and there was a blast on the trumpet. Lo, it is the threatened day. On that day will we cry to hell, Art thou full? And hell shall say, Is there yet any more? Which means, and here the blast on the trumpet, of course, in religious terms, the trumpet blast is the announcement, the great announcement that the promised one has come. And the threatened day has come. Here it's referred to as a threatened day because the ones who are evil and full of selfish desires and who control the means of everyone's existence and are doing it for selfish purposes, they are threatened, indeed, with the punishment that they are due. And it says, on that day we will cry to hell, of all places, Art thou full? Hell, of course, is a huge place, and hell shall say, Is there yet any more? Now, what's interesting is that this verse is quoted in the Baha'i writings in the Seven Valleys in an entirely different context. In the Seven Valleys, the question being asked is referring to someone who is spiritually imbued and desirous of becoming more and more spiritual. And it says, he drinketh in the ocean and asks, Is there yet any more? He can't get enough of spirituality. But here in the Quran, it's a warning that on the day of the promised one, hell shall be so full of people and just an endless supply of people going to, I don't want to say going to hell, but I'm not saying it. I'm reading it from the Quran. Now, before I start talking about these time prophecies, the question, will everyone recognize their Lord? It's appropriate to look into the Baha'i community itself and ask the same question. Well, just because you're a Baha'i, does that mean you automatically are absolved of everything and that you become purified? And of course not. Independent investigation of the truth and spiritual development proceeds at the pace of the individual himself or herself. When shall these things be, is always being asked. And Matthew warns, for false Christs and false prophets shall rise, and shall shew signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. And now this, when you think about it, the elect is not a lot of people. The elect is, anytime you have an election, you elect one person out of thousands of electors. So the elect are a select group of people. In this sense, Matthew is referring to those who become believers of the promised one when it happens, when he appears. Now, Abdul-Baha talks about the elect. He says, it is not through lip service only that the elect of God have attained to holiness, but by patient lives of active service, they have brought light into the world. The great mass of humanity does not exercise real love and fellowship. The elect of humanity are those who live together in love and unity. Now, this is Abdul-Baha, who, as I said, for 40 years was imprisoned along with Baha'u'llah, and after his imprisonment, in the later years of his life, was gracious enough to travel to America and across Europe, and to spend 8 months in this great land. It's a great land not because of anything we've done, but because Abdul-Baha came here. And he would still say, even to the Baha'is, it is not enough to say that you're holy. You must live, he says, by patient lives of active service. They have brought light into the world. So you must be patient, you must have active service, and you must bring light into the world. Now, of course, the light doesn't come from us, it comes from God, and we are the channel, and if we are detached from our selfish desires, we're not immune from selfish desires, but if we are detached, then our deeds will bear fruit. And Abdul-Baha explains to us how easy it is to bring light into the world, just live together in love and unity. How simple, how profound. But fortunately, the Baha'i community has the covenant of Baha'u'llah to protect them. Now, let's start talking about these time prophecies. These are some that I have gathered from the Bible, from the Jewish Torah and the Christian Gospel and the books that follow. These are some of the time prophecies I've discovered. Now, I am by no means an authority. Again, I said these are some that I've found. You're more than welcome to look them up yourselves and see what you come up with. We do have the great bounty and blessing of Abdul-Baha, who has explained the 3.5 times, or the 1,260 days, prophecies, and the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns from the book of Revelation. So from that, we can extrapolate everything else. That's a time prophecy. Abdul-Baha has also explained the 70 weeks prophecy, which is the coming of Jesus. These other ones, some of them are measured in lunar years, which are according to the lunar calendar, and some of them are in solar years. And some of them don't really explain like 7 times. You have to know what a time is. So they need further description or definition to be able to not only understand them, but to calculate them out, whether backwards or forwards. So let's go to our time prophecy timeline, and I'm going to switch charts here. And give me a minute. I've put these time prophecies on a timeline. So here is the timeline I think that's pretty easy to figure out. And as I mentioned, some of them are measured in solar years, others are measured in lunar years, and some of them in the same prophecy refer to both solar and lunar years, different time frames, but the same verse of the Bible. And so you really have to be on your toes. It's virtually impossible to figure out how these prophecies are going to lay out and be determined. And thankfully, Abdul-Baha has explained to us in clear terms how to do it.